Hello, this is Chris Wilhelm, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Friday, January 2nd issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our headline today, Mamdani vows to govern audaciously and protect New York's vulnerable. Zohran Mamdani gave his first public speech as mayor of New York City after an inauguration that drew tens of thousands of people. By Dana Rubenstein. Zohran Kwame Mamdani, the 34-year-old Democratic Socialist wunderkind who rose from political obscurity and charmed skeptics from the boardroom to the White House, was publicly sworn in as New York City's mayor on Thursday. In his first speech as mayor, before a shivering crowd of thousands outside City Hall, Mr. Mamdani sought to immediately reassure New Yorkers that he intended to carry out his affordability agenda, and that he would refuse to reset expectations for what government can and should deliver for the working class and the unprotected. "The only expectation I seek to reset is that of small expectations," Mr. Mamdani said. "Beginning today, we will govern expansively and audaciously." He promised to lead unapologetically both as a left-wing Democrat — "I was elected as a Democratic Socialist and I will govern as a Democratic Socialist," he said — and as a mayor for all New Yorkers, including those who did not support him. To those who view this administration with distrust or disdain, Mr. Mamdani said, "I promise you this, if you are a New Yorker, I am your mayor. Regardless of whether we agree, I will protect you, celebrate you, mourn alongside you, and never, not for a second, hide from you." The star-studded ceremony at City Hall featured two avatars of the progressive wing of American politics who had helped propel Mr. Mamdani to the mayoralty. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a fellow Democrat representing parts of Queens and the Bronx, delivered opening remarks, and Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont administered the oath of office, with Mr. Mamdani, the city's first Muslim mayor, resting his hand on two Qur'ans held by his wife, Rama Douaji. The message from the stage was unmistakable. In New York City, the left is ascendant, and to national Democratic leaders struggling to regain the party's footing, Mr. Mamdani's victory and the excitement surrounding it may suggest a path forward. "New York, thank you for inspiring our nation," Mr. Sanders said. "Thank you for giving us, from coast to coast, the hope and the vision that we can create government that works for all, not just the wealthy and the few." The event took place before thousands of well-wishers who flooded the plaza in front of City Hall and poured into a section of Broadway more typically closed off for parades down the Canyon of Heroes, but this time for the inauguration of a self-described champion of the underrepresented. Amid the sea of knit caps, union emblems, Democratic Socialists of America apparel, and the occasional keffiyeh, attendees stuffed hand warmers into gloves and shifted from foot to warm their toes. The midday event followed a significantly more modest and subdued swearing-in ceremony just after midnight, during which Mr. Mamdani legally became mayor of New York City. The subsequent public ceremony and adjoining block party captured how many New Yorkers have hungered for a more earnest-seeming, more hopeful alternative to 21st century American politics, and have been eager to turn the page on the cronyism and self-regarding swagger of the Eric Adams mayoralty. After much equivocation, Mr. Adams, who once called himself the future of the Democratic Party, attended Thursday's ceremony, and Mr. Mamdani spoke kindly of his ascent from an impoverished background to mayor of New York City. But when Mr. Mamdani nodded to mayors he admired from the past, Mr. Adams was not among them. Shortly after the ceremony ended, Mr. Mamdani traveled to Brooklyn to announce that he had enacted several executive orders, including one that revoked all prior executive orders issued after September 26, 2024, the date of Mr. Adams' indictment. That was a date that marked a moment when many New Yorkers decided politics held nothing for them, Mr. Mamdani said at a news conference in the borough. The festive atmosphere of Thursday's ceremony in Manhattan captured the generational, political, ethnic, and religious magnitude of Mr. Mamdani's ascent. The mayor took pains to underscore the city's diversity, referencing New Yorkers who spoke Yiddish and Creole and pray in churches, synagogues, mandirs, and temples, or not at all. Mr. Mamdani's nod to Palestinian New Yorkers in the Bay Ridge neighborhood of Brooklyn, who will no longer have to contend with a politics that speaks of universalism and that makes them the exception, earned particularly loud applause, as did his commitment to seeking tax hikes on the wealthy. The religious diversity of New York's leaders was also noted by its new comptroller, Mark Levine, who, along with the city's public advocate, Jumaane Williams, was sworn in on Thursday. How remarkable it is that on these steps today we have 3 swearings in, Mr. Levine said, one by a leader using a Quran, one by a leader using a Christian Bible, and one by a leader using a Chumash, or Hebrew Bible. I am proud to live in a city where this is possible. Mr. Mamdani can claim other firsts. He is New York City's first millennial mayor, its first South Asian mayor, and its first mayoral soccer fanatic. He is the city's youngest mayor in a century, and he is the first to be so wholly identified with the Democratic Socialists of America, whose local chapter fledged his political career. Mr. Mamdani is also arguably the most charismatic New York City mayor of the 21st century. His personal magnetism, warm, engaging smile, and seeming ability to engage politely with divergent positions have won over interlocutors in mosques and soup kitchens, in the Oval Office and on Wall Street. He has demonstrated an unusual ability to communicate his ideas to the masses in plain English and Urdu and Bengali and Spanish on social media in videos that often go viral. But Mr. Mamdani is also one of the least proven city managers in New York's history, with just 5 years of legislative experience under his belt and a resume that includes stints as a foreclosure prevention counselor and a high school English tutor. He has also managed a failed state Senate campaign, had a brief rap career as Mr. Cardamom, and worked as a music supervisor on Queen of Katwe, a film directed by his mother, Mira Nair. Now he will be responsible for 300,000 workers, comprising a government serving 8.5 million, where nearly every single major city department, from police and fire to environmental protection, qualifies as the nation's largest. Mr. Mamdani's ambitious agenda of fast and free buses and universal daycare makes even that already impossible-seeming task that much more daunting. He will have to underwrite those programs' estimated $7 billion a year price tag while managing deep cuts to federal funding, an erratic and often vengeful president, and a more moderate governor facing her own re-election this year. Accomplishing his goals is likely to require trade-offs that he has thus far shown little willingness to acknowledge. Can he achieve universal daycare while also elevating wages for those in the industry? Can he build 200,000 affordably priced apartments while mandating the workers who build them earn unionized wages? Can he manage the nation's largest paramilitary force in a teeming metropolis that is often more moderate than its national reputation suggests, while also retaining a far-left base that often evinces disdain for the police? The Ugandan-born only child of an Oscar-nominated movie director and a scholar of colonialism, Mr. Mamdani has vowed to become the first mayor to avoid visiting Israel since 1951. Can he tend to his anti-Israel base while retaining relations with New York's diverse Jewish community, many of whom continue to regard him with ample skepticism? He has overcome obstacles before. Just weeks before the Democratic primary, Mr. Mamdani was a distant second in the polls to former Governor Andrew M. Cuomo, who was trying to resurrect his career after he resigned amid a raft of sexual harassment allegations. Unpersuaded by his defeat in the primary, Mr. Cuomo ran in the general election on an independent ballot line. Mr. Mamdani triumphed again, winning just over 50% of the vote, with Mr. Cuomo garnering support from New Yorkers turned off by Mr. Mamdani's inexperience and his anti-Zionist and socialist views. Some people feel like he doesn't have any experience, but I think he can do the job, said Stephen Minter, a retired telecommunications worker and a resident of the Bronx, on Wednesday. I think we've gotten in trouble with people who have all kinds of experience. Mr. Mamdani has shown an early ability to practice realpolitik. So severe is his message discipline that reporters have recently found it difficult to derive news from his carefully worded responses at press conferences. He has held several private meetings with rabbis and Jewish leaders and recorded a video with the actor Mandy Patinkin and his wife, actress Catherine Grody, at their apartment to make latkes for Hanukkah. Mr. Patinkin performed Over the Rainbow at the inauguration, accompanied by a grade school chorus from Staten Island. Mr. Mamdani opted to retain Jessica Tisch, a billionaire heiress who served as Mr. Adams' sanitation commissioner, as the city's police commissioner, a concession to the business leaders and other New Yorkers who both esteem her and worry about Mr. Mamdani's former hostility to the police and his ability to actually tamp down on crime. To the concern of some leftists, his senior appointments have veered toward permanent government types, not tear-it-all-down socialists. He helped quash the congressional bid of an ideological ally in an effort to retain a working relationship with the possible next Speaker of the U.S. House, and he backed a staunch non-DSA ally in a Manhattan congressional seat at the expense of a potential DSA candidate. Mr. Mamdani will at least have the benefit of time, assuming he is not ejected from office after one term like his predecessor, Mr. Adams. Unlike many of the city's former mayors, Mr. Mamdani's attention is less likely to wander to national political ambitions. His status as a foreign-born naturalized citizen renders him unable to run for president. He may also benefit from roughly 100,000 volunteers who helped power his insurgent campaign. Running a winning campaign was extremely difficult, Mr. Sanders said, but running a city of 8.5 million people will be even harder. Zoran needed your help to win the election, Mr. Sanders said. Now he will need your help to govern. Members of the crowd roared their approval. Minnesota families are rattled by threat to cut federal aid for child care. After the federal government threatened to withhold funds for Minnesota's child care program, citing fraud concerns, parents and providers warned that the effects could be dire. By Ernesto Londoño. Minnesota daycare providers and parents are warning of severe consequences if federal health officials carry out plans to withhold funds for a program that makes child care affordable for thousands of families. The Department of Health and Human Services said on Tuesday that it was freezing funds for all Minnesota child care centers that it was supporting under the program, citing concerns about fraud. Daycare center owners said that they could go out of business in a matter of weeks. Parents said they feared the move could force them to quit jobs or put off studies so that they could care for their children. Many families in Minnesota are living paycheck to paycheck as it is, said Maria Snyder, who runs a daycare center in St. Paul. If parents have to quit work to care for children, she said, families could end up homeless. The consternation came a day after Jim O'Neill, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, announced that the federal government had frozen all child care payments to the state of Minnesota. In a post on social media, Mr. O'Neill cited a viral video produced by Nick Shirley, a conservative content creator who claimed to have exposed widespread fraud in daycare centers run by people of Somali origin. The video, which does not conclusively prove malfeasance, led to accolades from top officials in the Trump administration. We believe the state of Minnesota has allowed scammers and fake daycares to siphon millions of taxpayer dollars over the past decade, Mr. O'Neill said in his own video announcing the funding freeze. Leandra Estes, 42, a state employee, said a cutoff in federal funds for child care would be devastating to her family. Her 2 adult children, who live with her, work at daycare centers. Her youngest child, who is 4, attends a subsidized one that still costs several $100s per week. I don't have a family I am able to depend on to watch my kids, said Ms. Estes, who works for the agency that issues driver's licenses. Without the funding, I would be forced to quit my job or be terminated. At stake is about $185 million that the federal government provides to Minnesota annually to help subsidize child care centers attended by roughly 19,000 children. Andrew Nixon, a spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services, said Wednesday night that federal officials would continue to provide funding for Minnesota's child care program when they are satisfied that centers are operating with integrity. Federal health officials are demanding that their state counterparts provide more robust documentation about daycare centers, Mr. Nixon said. In particular, federal officials will be requesting detailed attendance logs and documents about regulatory actions or concerns for an unspecified number of centers that the federal government believes could be engaged in fraud, he said. For all other centers, he added, federal officials will demand routine administrative records. The threat to cut off federal aid for child care is the latest action by the Trump administration in response to a widening scandal over fraud in Minnesota's social services programs. Since 2022, federal prosecutors have charged dozens of people with felonies, accusing them of stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from programs meant to feed vulnerable children, assist people at risk of homelessness, and provide treatment to minors with autism. The vast majority of defendants are of Somali origin. Local law enforcement officials have investigated daycare centers for overbilling in recent years. Those investigations have led to relatively few convictions. Last month, Mr. Shirley visited several daycare centers owned by Somalis and demanded to be allowed inside to verify whether children were present. Most business owners rebuffed him. He said his inability to see children at the centers meant they were defrauding the government, an assertion many Republicans in Washington and Minnesota took at face value. Officials from the state agency that oversees daycare centers said they sent inspectors to the centers featured in Mr. Shirley's video this week, but they have yet to say what they found. On Wednesday, the Minneapolis Police Department said it was investigating a reported break-in at one of the daycare centers featured in the video. Managers at the center told reporters that someone broke in early Tuesday morning and stole enrollment records. Democrats in Minnesota called the Trump administration's response to the video reckless. The basis for this action is a single YouTube video that was deceptive and bigoted, perfect to appeal to Elon Musk's algorithm and Donald Trump's government, State Senator Liz Bolden said in a statement. Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat who is running for re-election, said that while fraud is a major problem his administration is working hard to address, President Trump's threat to cut off federal funds for social services in the state was unjustifiable. He's politicizing the issue to defund programs that help Minnesotans, Mr. Walz said in a statement. On New Year's Eve, parents who rely on subsidized child care in Minnesota said they were scared. Deco Noor, 24, said that losing access to child care for her son, who is 4, would likely mean putting off her dream of starting medical school later this year. People are struggling with rent as it is, she said. Ms. Noor, who is Somali-American, said she watched Mr. Shirley's video over the weekend and walked away feeling stunned and fearful. I'm sure he doesn't understand what his words are or how impactful they are, she said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In hearing transcript, Jack Smith defends decision to indict Trump. The former special counsel accused President Trump of exploiting violence on January 6, 2021, according to an interview released by House Republicans, by Glenn Thrush. Jack Smith, the former special counsel, defended his decision to twice indict President Trump, accusing him of exploiting violence on January 6, 2021, to overthrow the 2020 presidential election, according to a transcribed interview released by House Republicans Wednesday. Mr. Smith, a former prosecutor vilified by Mr. Trump as a partisan, spent much of the 8-hour closed-door session on December 17th before the House Judiciary Committee, rebutting a range of Republican claims, including the accusation that he had improperly obtained metadata on phone calls involving Trump-allied lawmakers. Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power, Mr. Smith said, according to the transcript. In the interview, Mr. Smith sought to undermine the narrative that the president was an innocent figure persecuted by partisans who weaponized federal law enforcement, a core belief among many Trump supporters. And Mr. Smith appeared intent on making another point, that he was unfazed by Mr. Trump's vow to prosecute him. I am eyes wide open that this president will seek retribution against me if he can, he said. Speaking in clipped, cautious tones, at times so quietly he was asked to talk louder, Mr. Smith defended Justice Department and FBI officials who have faced firings, transfers, and caustic public criticism from Mr. Trump and his allies. The former special counsel called such attacks false and misleading. Mr. Smith was appointed in late 2022 to oversee the investigations, already begun by the Justice Department, into Mr. Trump's retention of classified materials in Florida and his push to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Mr. Smith dropped both cases after Mr. Trump was elected to a second term, citing court rulings that prevented prosecution of a sitting president. Most of the interviews centered on the election interference case. A Trump-appointed federal judge in Florida has blocked release of Mr. Smith's report on the Florida case. As a result, Mr. Smith declined to answer most questions about the document's probe, citing the ruling. The House Judiciary Committee has already made a criminal referral of one of Mr. Smith's top deputies, Thomas Windom, to the Justice Department for not fully answering similar questions. Mr. Windom, now Mr. Smith's law partner, has denied wrongdoing. The transcript showed that Republicans, acting on Mr. Trump's demand to pursue those who pursued him, peppered Mr. Smith with detailed questions, apparently in hopes of catching him in a misstep that would justify a prosecution by the Justice Department. The interview did not yield obvious avenues for a case against Mr. Smith, according to House aides. The special counsel and Democrats have called for public hearings, which appeared likely to take place early in 2026, the aides said. Republicans spent much of their time in the interview grilling Mr. Smith over the Justice Department's successful effort to obtain subpoenas to track so-called toll records on phone calls made from the White House and Trump allies to at least 9 U.S. senators. An unidentified staff member working for Representative Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio and the committee's chairman, asked why Mr. Smith and his team needed the data and why investigators requested the subpoena be kept secret from the targets. Mr. Jordan followed up by suggesting many of the calls had already been made public in news accounts in previous investigations. Mr. Smith responded by saying they were needed to establish an indisputable timeline in court and added that none of the lawmakers targeted were the subject of a criminal probe. As he did repeatedly during the interview, Mr. Smith laid responsibility for the investigation on Mr. Trump, and specifically the president's decision to pressure members of his party to delay or reverse the results of the 2020 election. "I did not choose those members. Mr. Trump did," Mr. Smith said. He accused Trump and allies of exploiting the confusion and violence at the Capitol on January 6th to further their criminal scheme. According to the transcript, Mr. Smith pushed back hardest when Republicans suggested Mr. Trump's public statements after the 2020 election were protected under the First Amendment. "Fraud is not protected by the First Amendment," he said in the interview. Mr. Smith bristled when a Republican staff member, whose name was redacted in the transcript, pressed that point, citing a long list of disputed elections where candidates believed they were wronged and made allegations of voter fraud. "There is no historical analog for what President Trump did in this case," Mr. Smith responded. "He was free to say that he thought he won the election. He was even free to say falsely that he won the election," Mr. Smith said. But what he was not free to do was violate federal law and use knowingly false statements about election fraud to target a lawful government function. Coast Guard searches for survivors after more boat strikes. The U.S. military attacked a convoy of 3 boats in the Eastern Pacific on Tuesday and 2 more on Wednesday as part of the Trump administration's campaign against people suspected of drug trafficking. By Eric Schmidt. The U.S. Coast Guard is searching for an undetermined number of survivors of a U.S. military strike against several boats in the Pacific Ocean on Tuesday, the Pentagon and Coast Guard said on Wednesday. It was the 4th known instance of people surviving, at least initially, one of the 35 military strikes against boats in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific. Later on Wednesday, the military's U.S. Southern Command said that a separate lethal kinetic strike had killed 5 people in 2 boats that day. It did not say where the boats were traveling when the military attacked. There was no mention of survivors. The Trump administration says the boats that have been targeted since September were trafficking in narcotics, but has provided no evidence to support that assertion. Only 2 people have been rescued, and at least 115 have been killed in the strikes. The Coast Guard said in a statement that it was notified by the Pentagon on Tuesday that there were mariners in distress, people in the water, in an unspecified area of the Pacific Ocean. The U.S. Coast Guard is coordinating search and rescue operations with vessels in the area, and a Coast Guard C-130 aircraft is en route to provide further search coverage with the ability to drop a survival raft and supplies, the Coast Guard said in a statement. In a separate statement on Wednesday, Southern Command said that on orders from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, it opened fire the day before on a 3-boat convoy after intelligence analysts determined that the boats were traveling along known narco-trafficking routes and had transferred narcotics between the 3 vessels prior to the strikes. 3 people on the first boat were killed in the initial strike, Southern Command said. The remaining narco-terrorists abandoned the other 2 vessels, jumping overboard and distancing themselves before follow-on engagements sank their respective vessels, it continued in its statement. Following the strikes, Southern Command said it immediately notified the Coast Guard to launch search and rescue missions. Spokesman for Southern Command and the Coast Guard said they did not know how many survivors of the first strike jumped in the water or which vessels were searching for them. There have been other known instances in which people traveling in one of the boats attacked by U.S. Special Operations Forces survived at least the first volley. In the first strike on September 2nd, 9 people were killed in the initial strike on a boat in the Caribbean. About 30 minutes later, 2 survivors, shirtless, clung to the hull, tried unsuccessfully to flip it back over, then climbed on it and slipped off into the water over and over, according to lawmakers and congressional staff who viewed the video of the strike in its aftermath or were briefed on it. Admiral Frank M. Bradley, the commander of the operation at the time, gave an order for a follow-up strike, which killed the 2 survivors and ignited a controversy over whether the survivors of the first one remained in the fight or were technically shipwrecked, making it a war crime to kill them. On October 16th, the military struck a semi-submersible craft in the Caribbean. 2 men were killed, but 2 others from the boat were rescued by the U.S. military and repatriated within days to Colombia and Ecuador. Neither of the 2 survivors was prosecuted. Nearly 2 weeks later, the Trump administration announced that it had killed 14 people in 4 boats on October 27th in the Eastern Pacific. Mr. Hegseth said that the strikes, 3 of them, took place in international waters and that there had been 1 survivor. Mexican search and rescue authorities, the closest vessels to the strikes, were dispatched and combed the area but could find no trace of the survivor. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Fire in Swiss Alps leaves dozens of New Year's revelers dead. About 40 people celebrating at a ski resort bar were killed, and 115 were injured, many of them young, the authorities said. By Ségolène Lestradic, Christopher F. Schutze, Aurelian Breeden, and Richard Perez Peña. Fire ripped through a bar packed with young New Year's revelers in an upscale Swiss ski resort town early Thursday, killing about 40 people and injuring about 115, officials said in what the Swiss president called one of the worst tragedies our country has ever experienced. The victims from multiple countries had flocked to La Constellation Bar in the resort town of Crans-Montana, officials said when the blaze began. It set off a flashover when surfaces in an enclosed space become hot enough to ignite almost simultaneously, spreading flames with lethal speed. At least 1 explosion quickly followed. Guy Parmelin, president of the Swiss Federal Council, said that many lives, young for the most part, have been lost, and several medical officials also noted the youth of the victims. The head of the hospital in the city of Lausanne, where 22 severely burned people were taken, told the Swiss news site 24 Hours that most of them were between ages 16 and 26. University Hospital Zurich was treating 15 victims with severe burns, most of them young adults around the age of 20, a hospital spokesman said. Beatrice Pillaud, the prosecutor general for the canton of Valais, said it was too early to comment on the cause of the fire or on possible safety lapses at the bar, though she ruled out the possibility of terrorism. The authorities, she said, were focusing on identifying the victims, returning the bodies to their families, interviewing witnesses, and collecting and examining cell phones found in the bar. We have no suspects, she said. An investigation has been launched not against anyone, but to shed light on the circumstances surrounding this tragic fire. One witness, Bruno Martins, 17, said in an interview that when he headed to La Constellacion to meet friends, he found the bar in flames and surrounded by police officers. It was total panic. People were trampling each other, he said. At least one of his friends was badly burned, and others were unaccounted for. It's not real, it's a shock, Mr. Martins said, especially since it's a bar we know so well. Another witness, Nathan Huguenin, told the Associated Press that when he was outside the bar, I saw people pushing each other, falling down the stairs in a frenzy to escape. He said, I saw people completely burned. Alexis Laguerre, 18, told the Swiss broadcaster RTS that he and friends saw smoke billowing from the bar as they walked past, and that he called police at 1:28 a.m. While I was calling the police, there was an explosion, he said, and flames erupted from the bar. People were running through the flames, Mr. Laguerre recalled. Some, he said, tried to escape by using chairs to smash through the windows. It was a disaster without precedent for the region, Frederick Gisler, the police commander of LA, said at a news conference. As I speak, we have counted around 40 people dead and approximately 115 injured, most of them seriously. Officials did not name any of the victims and noted that the figures could still rise. About 30 Italians were believed to have been at the bar, and 16 were unaccounted for, said Italy's foreign minister, Antonio Tajani. 40 ambulances and 13 helicopters ferried the injured, many of them badly burned, to hospitals in several cities around Switzerland. 3 specialized jets took burn victims to Zurich, the country's largest city, more than 100 miles away. A few were being taken to Niguarda Hospital in Milan, which has one of Italy's leading burn centers, with burns over 30 to 40% of their bodies, said Guido Bertolaso, an official in the Lombardy region. Few hospitals have specialized burn units, and they are almost always in large cities, making rapid treatment difficult for people in more remote areas. Switzerland has 2 major burn centers, in Zurich and Lausanne. The nearest hospital to Crans-Montana, in the town of Sion, took 60 patients, seriously straining its capacity, said Matthias Reynard, president of the Valais Canton. He appealed to people not to clog emergency services with situations that can be avoided. Distraught people gathered at the hospital, hoping for word about their friends and relatives. Some, unable to find the missing, drove on to another hospital. One of those at the hospital in Sion, Eduardo Saita, 25, said he had escaped the bar as soon as he saw smoke, but that his friend was less fortunate. She was being treated at the hospital, where the staff had said she would be transferred to Milan. Crans-Montana in southwestern Switzerland lies about 30 miles as the crow flies from the borders of both Italy and France. With only about 10,000 residents, it has 2,800 hotel rooms and draws about 3 million visitors a year, according to the ski resort's website. It is known for its slopes and views of the Alps, as well as its restaurants, luxury stores, and big sporting events. It was scheduled to host the men's and women's World Cup ski races later this month. This tragedy occurred in a place that is naturally associated with life and joy, said Mr. Parmelin, the president, who postponed a scheduled New Year's address to travel to the scene. Nightclubs, bars, and concert venues, combining large crowds, limited exits, and sometimes pyrotechnics, have been the scenes of fatal fires around the world, some of them claiming hundreds of lives. Less than a year ago, a blaze in a nightclub killed 59 people in Macedonia. In the United States, one in Warwick, Rhode Island, killed 100 in 2003. One of the worst gutted the Coconut Grove nightclub in Boston in 1942, leaving 492 people dead. A monumental church in Amsterdam is ravaged by flames on New Year's Day. Local residents were evacuated after a fire broke out at the Vondelkerk shortly after midnight. The cause of the blaze has not yet been confirmed. By Gina Smialek. A deconsecrated Amsterdam church built roughly 150 years ago was engulfed in flames in the early hours of New Year's Day, prompting widespread evacuations and causing extensive damage to the cultural monument. There were no initial reports of casualties. The fire at the Vondelkerk broke out around 12:45 a.m., according to local authorities, sending flames shooting through its historic neo-Gothic spire. The blaze swiftly ravaged the Vondelkerk's roof and collapsed its tower, and strong winds blew sparks and burning debris into the surrounding area, according to the area's safety department. The authorities reported that the fire had been brought under control by roughly 11 a.m., and citing a structural engineer, said the church walls would remain standing. The cause of the fire was not yet known, and the police and fire department investigation, which was set to begin on Thursday, could take weeks, said Marco de Leeuw, a spokesman for the Amsterdam-Amsteland Safety Region, which is responsible for fire and emergency services. The blaze occurred during New Year's celebrations, and there had been many fireworks in the area, spurring speculation online that they could have caused the disaster. Mr. de Leeuw said that there was no sign that anyone had been in the church at the time of the blaze, and that no deaths were expected to have resulted from the fire. By around midday on Thursday, firefighters had not yet entered the church itself because it was still deemed unsafe to do so. Nearby homes were evacuated overnight and their power supply was cut off. A makeshift shelter was set up to house the displaced, taking in dozens of people at one point in the night, according to a website run by the local authorities. The fire came amid a push to stop at-home firework displays across the Netherlands. Fireworks are already banned in Amsterdam and other major cities, and sales will be banned across the country starting in 2026. The Vondelkerk was built in the 1870s, according to Stadsherstel, a local urban restoration group, and was once used for Catholic worship. It had fallen into disrepair by the late 1970s and was renovated for use in cultural events and other functions. Pierre Coopers, the Dutch architect responsible for Amsterdam's famed Rijksmuseum and Central Station, designed the structure. It is not the first fire to hit the church. The original spire was lost in a 1904 blaze, according to Stadsherstel. Iran protests turned deadly as violence and anger spread. Financial pressures have fueled a fifth day of demonstrations around Iran, with at least one person killed in the protests so far, according to the authorities. By Ben Hubbard, Sanam Mahusi, and Neeli Nikunazar. At least one person has been killed in Iran in clashes between protesters and the security forces, Iran's state-run media and activists groups said on Thursday as the government sought to quell demonstrations fueled by financial woes. The government identified a man killed in a protest late Wednesday as a 21-year-old member of a militia that works alongside the security forces. A rights group countered that, saying that he had been among the protesters. Semi-official news outlets and a rights group described violence and other deaths during a protest in the western city of Lordogan on Thursday, but it was not possible to immediately verify those claims. On Wednesday, protesters threw objects at a government building complex in Fasa in south-central Iran, and then shook its gates until they opened. President Masoud Pezeshkian on Thursday said the Iranian government urgently needed to address people's concerns. According to God's Quran, if we do not solve people's problems, we will have a place in hell, he said in an interview with a local television station during a visit to southwestern Iran. Protests have broken out across the Iranian capital, Tehran, and other cities this week as high inflation and a currency collapse have roiled the economy and impoverished many Iranians. On Thursday, the semi-official Tasnim news agency reported on Telegram that Iranian authorities arrested 30 individuals for disrupting public order in the Malard County, west of Tehran. The protests are now in their fifth day. While the early protesters were mostly merchants and university students in major Iranian cities, more recent demonstrations have been held in smaller cities in the country's west. On Thursday, the Tasnim news agency cited Kazem Nazari, the public prosecutor of Kudasht County, as saying that some protesters chanted subversive slogans and committed acts of sabotage, including throwing stones at the security forces during a demonstration the day before. 13 officials were injured, Mr. Nazari said, and one member of the Basij, a militia that works with Iran's security forces, died after sustaining severe injuries. In a report, the Hengau Organization for Human Rights, a Kurdish rights group, said government forces had shot the man while he was protesting, and he had died after being taken to a hospital. Neither of those claims could be verified. Iran's government has responded violently to waves of protests in recent years, arresting and even killing demonstrators. This time, government leaders have called for dialogue with protest leaders and others. Much of the country was shut down on Wednesday. The government attributed the closure to cold weather. Some analysts suggested it also sought to prevent protests. During a visit to the Chaharmahal and Bakhtiari province in southwestern Iran on Thursday, Mr. Pezeshkian said the government had to find ways to help people. If people are dissatisfied, we are to blame, he said, according to the state-run IRNA news agency. I do not look for America or anyone else to blame. We must serve people so that people are satisfied with us. His tone of national responsibility contrasted with statements by other prominent officials who have cast blame on unknown enemies, usually understood to mean the United States and Israel. Iran's economy has struggled because of strict Western sanctions and a 12-day war last year during which Israel and the United States bombed its nuclear facilities. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Sabotage suspected in cutting of undersea cable, Finnish police say. The authorities seized the Fitberg, a cargo ship that was en route from Russia to Israel when it sliced the cable in the Gulf of Finland. By Neil Vigdor and Johanna Lamola. A cargo ship severed an undersea telecommunications cable in the Gulf of Finland on Wednesday in what the Finnish police said they suspected was an act of sabotage that led them to seize the vessel. The ship, the Fitberg, was en route from St. Petersburg in Russia to the port of Haifa in Israel when it damaged a cable connecting the capitals of Helsinki in Finland and Tallinn in Estonia, the authorities said. The vessel was sailing under the flag of the Caribbean island nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines at the time of the episode, which officials said happened around 5 a.m. local time. The cut did not disrupt service, according to Elisa, the Finnish telecommunications company that operates the cable. In a statement, Elisa said that its network was designed and secured with multiple routes, so services are not disrupted if a connection is cut. Details about the depth and thickness of the cable were not available. The Finnish authorities said on Wednesday that they were investigating the incident as aggravated criminal damage, attempted aggravated criminal damage, and aggravated interference with telecommunications. On Wednesday, officials stopped short of pointing fingers at a possible foreign actor. Hopefully it was not a deliberate act, but the investigation will clarify, Alar Karis, Estonia's president, said on social media of the damage to the cable. The Estonian and Finnish authorities are working closely together to gather additional information. The section of cable that was damaged was in Estonia's exclusive economic zone, according to investigators, who said that the Fitberg was intercepted in Finnish waters with its anchor lowered into the sea. A tactical team with the Finnish border guard rappelled to the ship's deck from helicopters before seizing the vessel and taking custody of its 14 crew members, the authorities said. The crew members were from Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Russia. According to maritime records, the ship is managed and operated by Albro Shipping and Trading Ltd., which is based in Istanbul. The company did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Wednesday. The second telecommunications cable connecting Finland and Estonia experienced an outage on Wednesday, though it was not immediately clear if the two events were connected. It was not the first time that an undersea cable in the Baltic region has been damaged. In November 2024, Germany's defense minister said that the severing of 2 fiber optic cables in the Baltic Sea within 1 day of each other was an act of sabotage aimed at European countries that were supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia. One of those cables connected Finland and Germany, and the other runs between Lithuania and Sweden. Last December, the Finnish authorities seized an oil tanker on the suspicion that it was involved in cutting vital undersea cables and that the ship might have been part of Russia's shadow fleet, aimed at evading Western restrictions. Repeat moviegoers help Hollywood eke out a slightly better 2025. Ticket sales in North America totaled $8.9 billion for the year, up 2% from 2024, but the box office remains far below pre-pandemic levels. By Brooks Barnes. Let's start with the good. Movie theaters in the United States and Canada sold an estimated $8.9 billion in tickets in 2025, a 2% increase compared with a year earlier, according to the ComScore data service. That was no small achievement given the staggering number of seats that went unsold in months like October when one film after another, The Smashing Machine, Tron Ares, and Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, fizzled in wide release. Theaters also got smarter about catering to the people who still show up. The number of habitual moviegoers, people who see a film in a theater at least 6 times a year, increased 8%, according to Cinema United, a trade group. Growing membership programs like AMC Stubs A-List, Regal Unlimited, Cinemark Movie Club, and the resurrected Movie Pass added momentum. And some movies connected with audiences to an unexpected degree. Studios started one colossal new franchise, Minecraft, and revived another, Lilo and Stitch. Originality also showed signs of life, with Sinners, F1 the Movie, and Weapons making the year's top 20 ticket-selling list. No purely original movies, not based on a prior work, made the cut in 2024. For an industry struggling to maintain its relevance in the face of sweeping changes in consumer behavior and technology, even small improvements like these matter. Only a few years ago, when the COVID-19 pandemic forced many theaters to close for long periods, it was an open question whether moviegoing would survive at all. Now for the bad and the ugly. For the most part, dramas and comedies continue to flatline. The carnage included the poorly reviewed Ella McKay, which was written and directed by the Hollywood legend James L. Brooks. It cost an estimated $60 million to make and market and has collected about $4 million in North America since its release on December 12th. Studios and theaters split ticket sales roughly 50-50. Studios used to give theaters an exclusive window of about 90 days to show new movies. That changed during the pandemic, when movies started to become available for digital rental or purchase after as little as 17 days. This eviscerated the incentive to see movies in theaters, especially dramas and comedies, which play just fine on living room TVs. To sell a substantial number of tickets, non-franchise films seem to need otherworldly reviews. Rotten Tomatoes scores below the 80% positive range rarely cut it anymore, analysts say. It now takes something truly special to break through with original stories, said David A. Gross, a film consultant who publishes an influential newsletter on box office numbers. In addition to quality, moviegoers want stars and spectacle. He pointed to films like Marty Supreme, a period sports drama starring the white-hot Timothée Chalamet that has taken in a strong $37 million since arriving in wide release on Christmas Day. Directed by Josh Safdie, Marty Supreme had a Rotten Tomatoes score of 94% positive as of Wednesday. The movie cost $65 million to make and tens of millions more to market. Marty Supreme contributed to a burst of year-end moviegoing, with audiences also responding to The Housemaid, a thriller based on a popular book, $54 million over its first 12 days, and David, a faith-based animated adventure, $56 million over its first 12 days. The mega-budget Avatar: Fire and Ice was easily the #1 movie at domestic theaters over the Christmas holiday. The sequel has taken in $242.1 million since arriving on December 19th. The problem? In 2023, Avatar: The Way of Water collected $317.4 million over the same period. That's a 24% slide from film to film. Avatar isn't the only Hollywood franchise in apparent decline. Others include Jurassic World and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The SpongeBob movie, Search for SquarePants, has sold about $44 million in tickets since arriving on December 19th, down 58% from results for the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, over the same number of days in 2015. In part because of weaker results for franchise films, total yearly sales in North America remain roughly 22% below totals for pre-pandemic years. Foot traffic is probably down even more because theaters have raised ticket prices since then. Is it time for Hollywood to concede that a lot of moviegoers in the United States and Canada are never coming back? That movie theaters have permanently lost 20% of their customers? Some analysts say yes. And things may be about to get worse. Warner Brothers, which supplied more hits to theaters in 2025 than any other studio, has agreed to sell itself to Netflix as part of an $83 billion deal. If the purchase goes through, Netflix has indicated that it will experiment with shorter periods of theatrical exclusivity for Warner Brothers releases. Even the sky may not be the limit for AI data centers. Some tech leaders are concerned that the artificial intelligence race will exhaust available land and energy. The solution may lie in orbit. By Eli Tan and Ryan Mack. If the architects of the artificial intelligence boom are right, it is only a matter of time before data centers, the giant computing facilities that power AI, will float in orbit and be visible in the night sky like planets. The science fiction-like dream is being driven by AI and space industry leaders who are growing increasingly worried that data centers will eventually require more energy and land than are available on Earth. One solution, perhaps the only solution, they say, is to start building them in space. Google announced in November that it was working on Project Suncatcher, a space data center project that would begin test launches in 2027. Elon Musk said at a recent conference that space data centers would be the cheapest way to train AI not more than 5 years from now. Others pledging support for the idea include Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and Blue Origin, Sam Altman, the chief executive of OpenAI, and Jensen Huang, the chief executive of NVIDIA. It is not a debate, it is going to happen, said Philip Johnston, the chief executive of StarCloud, a space data center startup. The question is when. The notion has gained traction as the AI race hits a fever pitch, fueling fears of a potential bubble. Meta, OpenAI, Microsoft, Amazon, and other big tech companies are investing hundreds of billions in data centers worldwide, with OpenAI alone committing $1.4 trillion to such projects. Saudi Arabia and other nations are also pouring money into these efforts, while smaller companies pile up debt and take on financial risks to join the frenzy. Yet earthbound data centers are increasingly running into limits. In many places, the projects lack enough available power for the computing needs. Local opposition has also flared over whether data centers are driving up utility bills and exacerbating water shortages. That has led to more creative, some might say wishful, thinking with space data centers. Technologists and scientists have researched the idea and concluded that some version of these projects may be possible in the next few decades, but skeptics said the proposals flew in the face of physics and would be astronomically expensive. Tech luminaries like Mr. Musk have also recently made comments about space data centers that are a magnitude larger than what current research suggests is possible, said Pierre Leonet, a space economist and director at Eurospace, a trade association. It's completely nonsensical, he said. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration introduced the idea of space data centers in the 1960s. In the 1980s, the concept of data repositories in space popped up in science fiction stories. In the last decade, the notion of space data centers that could power modern AI also emerged. The main benefit to building a data center in space is abundant energy, with nearly 24/7 access to the sun and no clouds to obstruct the project's solar panels, Mr. Johnston said. There are also fewer environmental regulations than on Earth, not to mention fewer neighbors to oppose the imposition or complain about electric bills. But the feasibility hinges on whether it will become cheaper to launch materials into space and whether technical issues like radiation and cooling can be solved in the meantime. Experts are split on how soon these conditions can be met. As a business case, it's plausible, said Phil Metzger, a physics professor at the University of Central Florida and a former physicist at NASA. It's been an evolving discussion. Data centers in space would look different from the football stadium-sized facilities on Earth. Most mock-ups from companies like StarCloud look like large satellites with a cluster of servers housing AI chips at the center of miles of solar panels to power them. The data centers would need to be rebuilt every 5 years, which is when the computer chips are typically replaced, Mr. Johnston of StarCloud said. They would be visible at dawn and dusk from Earth, he said, appearing in the sky as about a quarter the width of the moon. But it is too expensive to create space data centers today. A kilogram of material costs around $8,000 to launch into space, Mr. Leonet said. The cheapest rate, around $2,000 per kilogram, is offered by the rocket maker SpaceX, he added. Individual server racks in a data center can weigh over 1,000 kilograms. If the space launch costs fall to around $200 per kilogram, the economics will start to make sense, Dr. Metzger said. He predicted that would take around a decade. In a research paper about Suncatcher, published in November, Google predicted the costs could decline to that level in the mid-2030s, comparing the timeline to its driverless robot taxis, which took 15 years to develop. Others said they were not sure the costs would drop in such a short time. It's like saying if we can get the cost of a McDonald's cheeseburger down to 10 cents, we will buy so many of them, Mr. Leonet said. Modern computer chips and semiconductors are also not built to withstand the radiation in space, which would hurt their ability to compute reliably, said Benjamin Lee, an electrical and systems engineering professor at the University of Pennsylvania. And while space is a frigid minus 455 degrees Fahrenheit, it is also a vacuum. That means there is no air to transfer the heat from the AI chips. To cool the chips, the data centers would instead require large radiator panels to disperse the heat. Such hurdles have not stopped people like Mr. Musk, who leads SpaceX and the artificial intelligence startup xAI. Mr. Musk started engaging with others about space data centers in November on X, the social media platform he owns, saying that serious AI scaling had to be done in space. In another post, he mused about building 300 gigawatts of space data centers, which would require more than half of the power that the United States uses in a year. Brett Johnson, SpaceX chief financial officer, said in a letter to shareholders last month that the company would explore an initial public offering next year, partly to raise money for projects including AI data centers in space. SpaceX and Mr. Musk did not respond to requests for comment. Tom Mueller, a former SpaceX executive who believes humans will hit the limits of terrestrial energy sources by 2040, said part of the reason Mr. Musk and other AI leaders were talking about space data centers was the financial opportunity. The hottest thing to invest in right now is AI, and the second hottest thing is space, Mr. Mueller said. Now they're converging. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Friday, January 2nd issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Chris Wilhelm. Thanks for listening and Happy New Year.